Yeah.
I just thought that was wicked sense. That'd be nice.
Anyone Gabrielle?
Well, yeah, I got just something I didn't understand in your presentation there, Adam. What was it? Histograms? You're talking about histograms.
It's not incredibly complicated statistical terminology, but it's basically an indication of where the different proportions in groups lie. So what the I mean, obviously, I forgot I only had 10 minutes. I thought I had 15, so I apologise for skipping through very much towards the end. I hope you managed to get the main gist of it. But a histogram is basically a distribution diagram. So it shows you where the relative percentages or relative numbers of populations lie. So in the instance which I was referring to, which a histogram was about, you can see that within the two categories below the very top hypertexting category, there was significantly more female activity than male. Suggests that one of my hypotheses about females engaging a greater level of texting activity was grounded, basically.
Questions for Adam. I don't know how.
Go for it, doesn't matter.
With the data that you got before, and you were showing like on graphs and stuff.
Yeah.
Obviously, that was subscribed, like contract phones, because I was like if it.
I think it's network monitoring, so they're looking at all the activity across all the various phone networks, especially with the US. I mean, there's a significant governmental organisation, so I think it's actually network traffic rather than subscriptions.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah. That's one.
Is that a question? No, stretch it.
Ollie.
It's just a question about the last speakers. I've forgotten your name. First, I want to say I think it's really great, just the way in which you were talking about it, in the sense that you just did and you connected to these kind of primordial instincts. I was wondering, how you think it kind of connects back to the last session we had when people were talking about communes and occupations, and how people could go about just doing and just building and just creating this community. I mean, it seems more and more people are talking about the failures of this society and capitalism and everything, is falling apart or whatever. But how do we communicate that, this essence of just doing and just going out there and really connecting to these things without putting it too much in a confined context and sitting around for ages and just endless discussion of what we need to do, and no one's actually going out there and doing anything. How can we kind of move this forward without confining it at the same time, if you get what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I feel it's really a matter of perspective, because I think the Occupy movement is absolutely incredible because they're creating a vision for alternative, but from the outside it might be seen that they're just complaining about what already exists. I think if you look out into the world, you'll really see that things are happening and people are really taking the initiative to make these changes. And if you focus on the corruption or how messed up our own economic system or whatever it is, you're not ever going to really you're not going to subscribe anyone to your ideas unless you show them how it's possible to do something else. I mean, there were nearly 100 people who came and did that, and each of them came and were saying, I want to do this, I want to make this happen in my life, and by being part of it they were gaining the skill. So it's an individual engagement with the process, which takes initiative. But yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I wondered if you'd ever come across the street farmers. Your work reminded me of this group that were at the Architectural Association in the 60s, and it may be that their work is no longer acknowledged as being extremely pioneering. I just wanted to mention them to you. And I also wondered if you looked at Japanese dwellings and how flexible they can be, so that we don't have set walls, and the freedom that can give you inside a dwelling. And I wanted to ask if you'd thought about, you're saying that the structure imposes on the lives of the people and perhaps forms their identities. But what's interesting in Japan is that people are very formal and seem to be quite flexible. They expect relationships to be very structured and set and boundaries very clear. And yet, within the dwelling space, the boundaries are not clear at all. You can move walls very easily, and it's a wonderful freedom. It's a very interesting concept.
That's really interesting. Because I was reading recently about the symbology of the dragon, we were talking about this morning. In many Japanese homes, a sword would be pierced into the ground before the foundations were laid, and it was about slaying the sacred feminine, or the dragon of the earth, in order to build these foundations. So it's interesting that within that space, then, you have the flexibility to move.
Yes, interesting.
Tom?
How do you find laws through planning permission affect humans' choice in building, especially in Britain and Europe? There's so many restrictions on how people can create their own homes. Do you find this has a negative effect?
Oh, wow, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's incredibly difficult, but the thing is, if you're building on a garden attached to a house, the laws are far more lax. As long as it doesn't take up too much space and you're not living there and these things. If people want to go out and actually start building in the community, like out on a field, it's a lot harder. But I mean, the government are changing lots of planning laws to mean that people can build in beautiful countryside a lot more, which of course is a terrible thing. I think we should just take agency in making it clear what we want to be built, and that's an opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. That was all three of you. That was really interesting. I have a question sort of to, I can't remember your name, what's your name?
Me?
Yes.
Oh, Kathy, yeah.
Kathy, okay. I have a question sort of related to how this notion of sort of building, thinking, dwelling, whether that can sort of be related somehow to you inhabiting almost the story or the film going over in, whether there's some sort of spillover effect between the two presentations in that sense. And to you, in terms of, you said that, or you quoted Heidegger saying, only if we are capable of building, only then can we build, only if we're sort of, how building and dwelling and thinking is fundamentally interrelated, and whether there is in that sense sort of, we've been talking a lot about education throughout these 2 days, and whether there is a sort of way for, through this approach, to sort of make thinking, well, sort of bringing it back maybe to a sort of that we don't need the means, sort of say that thinking is bad for you because it's disconnected, because like fundamentally we have a very physical practice in what we do here as well, and how we inhabit the academic world, so to speak, whether there's sort of how we can retain both the value of both of them. Maybe.
Thinking about dwelling, I think, the Forest of Bliss really is a film that you have to, dwell upon and in. It's quite interesting because how you see it as well obviously affects that and how it's portrayed. And I've been projecting it onto my, bedroom wall at home and stuff, and it's much more immersive to sort of have that kind of correlation as well between, transporting something out of context as well, and that as well. But it's quite different because it's also an almost virtual, dwelling as well. You're not, you're evoking a place, and then that has all other issues of, sort of representational value and sort of, and all that kind of stuff as well. But does that answer? I'll leave it there. That you answer yours.
Well, no, absolutely. Like I said, I think education is a huge part of it. But I feel that I found that film yesterday incredibly inspiring, and I feel that we're educating very narrow-minded direction with our children of a way of thinking. I think that the community has people within our community and the wider Earth community of different societies, that's why anthropology is so great, have so much to teach us about different ways of living. And it's not about kind of picking and choosing which ones best suit us, because I think it's a shame to just become one massive conglomeration of one monoculture, which will be our Western incredibly imposing way of thinking. But I think education can really sow seeds of agency and engagement in the world, which I don't think our system does at the moment, and can make people, can empower people to make the best of their lives that they possibly can. That should be the role of education.
Abby, is there a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Kathy really quickly, if you could talk about in the space, because you're working in more art school, it was more of a studio space type style.
It's an art history or history of art sort of thing. So actually, what I had a picture of that sort of sunken space actually used to be the old slideshow area, and it's now got the computers sort of based there and that as well. But there's no art practice. In fact, there's actually no art practice at UEA because there's the Norwich University College of Arts in the city centre and that as well. So and also I probably should say that a lot of sort of my practical experience of doing visual ethnography, and that was from a year abroad as well, that I did in California. So there isn't actually the facilities at UEA to.
I meant more in the space itself. Is it basically instead of having a lecture or a seminar, when you would talk, how was it? So, for example, I went to art school. There's a whole different approach to how your staff talk to you. I was just wondering, because you've got a bit of anthropology and a bit of history of art, and whether or not the art side came in more on it.
Well, it is, there's a mixed faculty, but it's a sort of more conventional teaching approach where you have seminars, but say I might have a seminar that's taught by an anthropologist and an archaeologist together, sort of, discussing material culture, and, so a bit of debate goes on in front of you in the seminars, but they're generally quite small as well, but also lecture programs as well, and that as well, sort of addressing world art issues.
Hi, this is for Ben. I was just wondering, did you have to do lots of planning for the house, or did you sort of wing it?
We winged it all. I started and went, okay, yeah, so why don't we just start today? Yeah, it'll be done by next Wednesday. I think that's just my ridiculous blind optimism. So, no, it was kind of like build the foundations and then go, okay, now what? So we do. But we learned just through experience and through different people coming in who had different skills. Someone had made a roof before. Great, yeah, come along for a week. Let's do that. And it was really perpetuated by the skills of the people that we managed to incorporate.
My question is for Ben as well. So phenomenology, I can say it right, sort of the critique of Cartesian dualism, right? And you said how you yourself want to sort of deconstruct the dichotomies of mind and body and that sort of thing. Like, did you feel that making your own home, which no one ever really does anymore, do you feel that helped you achieve that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was the happiest time of my life, actually. And what was interesting, we've had lots of talks about femininity and masculinity, and I've never felt like more of a man than when I had a pickaxe and I was pickaxing rubble, and then I leant down and I could pick up bluebell bulbs that were like inside the rubble and collecting those to plant for this spring, and they're just coming up now. But to think of both the hard and the soft as being just as masculine, to physically engage in the world, I think is a thing that men need and that they don't get. They can get it through sport, but it's still an institutionalized physical activity rather than being an expression of creation or, I think so. Absolutely.
Okay, we can't take any more questions unless it's really quick. We've literally got a minute.
No.
We have a 5 or 10 minute break.
No,
we're not.